Welcome to the Jake E Show. I'm your host, Jake Ehrlich. And today I have Karissa from Watch and Woman joining me. How you doing, Karissa?
I'm so good, so excited. I'm a big fan of Rolex magazine, so I'm excited to be here and share this amazing news.
And we have something so exciting to share with you. First and foremost, this is the first time in history that I'm aware of where Rolex has introduced new models more than once in a year. And this is new. This is from out of the blue. And there have been no teasers. But you mentioned that you noticed that with their Instagram account and stuff like that, you're like, oh, that's why they're showing this
Yeah,
stuff,
it's
right?
like, once I heard the news, it was like, oh, because if you follow them on Instagram, you see that, they're posting all this, sea dweller, deep sea stuff, and then the cool vintage ads. I had some followers send it to me and be like, hey, look what they're posting. And I'm like, hmm. And now, knowing the news, I'm just like, makes sense. Smart, Rolex. Smart.
What's your initial impression of the Deep Sea Challenge?
It actually looks really great. More practical than I thought. It's a big size, but I don't know, it's definitely manly. I'm sure there's going to be some women out there who will rock it, but to me, I mean, I wear a 40 millimeter Daytona, and I can't imagine, wearing a big 50 millimeter, but that doesn't take away from how cool it is, and, I would love to see that thing on a guy.
So this is the biggest Rolex ever made. This is
Yeah.
a 50 millimeter Rolex, and the biggest Rolex to date, at least in modern times, is 44 millimeter with the Deep Sea. Now, in the past, when Rolex has made watches for Panerai, those were 47 millimeters. So this isn't that much bigger. And from what I understand, they've optimized it to make it very wearable. I mean, I don't even know where to begin with this because there's so many interesting characteristics of this watch. First and foremost, it's made out of titanium. And this is the first production watch. Now, our captain Danny ran a story about how Rolex was testing prototypes for a Yachtmaster made out of titanium. And ironically, that prototype, that titanium Yachtmaster, didn't have a date on it, which gave it a very vintage 5512 Submariner 5513 vibe, more tool watchy. And this watch also doesn't have a date on it. So it's got a super tool watch kind of vibe.
Yeah. I think maybe because, I mean, I don't know, maybe not, but I think because the glass is so thick. I think that's probably one of the reasons why they didn't put a date on it.
No, I think the thing is, like, if you're, 36,000 feet below the ocean floor, you probably don't care.
Right.
Yeah, you probably don't really need to know the date. I guess. I
Because
don't
you're
know.
stuck down there for a few days.
Yeah. Which kind of begs the question of, like, who's this watch for exactly? Because as Rolex points out, when you can't, a human being can't go this deep.
Exactly. I was about to say, like, exactly. But the fact that it can, hey, that's good enough for me.
So one of the really fascinating characteristics of this model is it's available to the public, and a Rolex Deep Sea special prototype Rolex has been making since the early 1950s. In 1953, they made the first prototype that set an all-time depth record with Auguste Piccard and his son Jacques Piccard off of the coast of Italy in Ponza. And then in 1960, they had another deep sea special with the Bathyscaphe Trieste, where they took it down 7 miles, which is incredible if you think about it. And that was an all-time depth record that stood for many, many, many years and arguably stands to this day, which we'll get into more later. But in 2012, James Cameron, the director who did Avatar, who's arguably the most successful director, at least at the box office in history. He built a submersible and tried to break Rolex's record, and came very, very, very close to it, but wasn't able to break it. But he sure did try, and Rolex made some special Rolex Deep Sea Challenge watches for his submersible that they put on the outside. And what's so interesting is with all 3 generations of those Rolex Deep Sea Special prototypes, they've never been available to the public ever. The public couldn't buy them. But now all of a sudden, with this Deep Sea Dweller, which can go down to 36,090 feet, which is 11,000 meters, you'll be able to buy one and wear it. And Deep Sea that Cameron had wasn't wearable. So they decided they wanted to make this so people could actually wear it. And at 15 millimeters, it's not that much bigger than a vintage Panerai. So for big dudes. Now, the other thing that's really interesting, too, is it's made out of titanium. And with titanium is much stronger than steel. I think it's like 3 to 4 times as strong as steel. But it's 30% lighter than steel. So even though it's bigger, it would be lighter and more wearable on the wrist. So you wouldn't rock this, Karissa?
I mean, I would love to just see how it fits on my wrist first. Because, I would love to see if it's just like a hunk. I'm in my mind, I'm just thinking that I try this watch on and my hand just boom. Maybe not. Maybe it's titanium, it's super light, and it's just a really big, face. And, hey, maybe I would be cool with it. But in all honesty, when I do try on Deep Seas, it's just so thick that it's not comfortable for me, and just in reality, even though I think they're super pretty, I love in 2014 when they came out with that Deep Blue, or I think that's what it's called, from James Cameron. I fell in love. I was like, that's so pretty. And I was out eating dinner. I saw a woman wearing one with a blue dress, and she just looks spectacular. So I would never say never. You never know. But I just think they're a little too big and thick for my liking, at least.
So what Rolex needs to do, I think, they need to make a 40 millimeter Submariner with a blue dial for sure, right? Because you would rock that.
Yeah, I love 40 millimeters. If I'm gonna have a big, this is my Rolex, and yeah, I would prefer that. I do wear my 31 millimeter OPs, very fun, very cute, but I do love wearing the bigger, and I do want a sub. So if they make a sub with that dial, I definitely would love it.
So we didn't do a wristwatch check. What are you wearing? Are you wearing your two-tone Daytona?
Yeah.
And that's a heavier watch because it's gold.
Well, I also have a solid gold GMT, and I love the weight. So for me, I will alternate with, some girly watches. Really depends on my outfit. But for example, if I have 3 days where I'm wearing a smaller watch, I'll throw on my Daytona and I just feel it. And I think that's what at least a lot of the Rolex owners do. They like the way it feels. So yeah, this is my big boy Daytona that I love.
So wristwatch check. I'm wearing my Omega Man on the Moon LV Submariner. That's the bit. Is it Submariner or is it Submariner? That's the age-old question. I think it's Submariner.
Well, I say Submariner, so.
Everybody says Submariner.
But I'm from Miami, and we say everything messed up, so.
Perfect. Now, what's interesting is I happen to have my Apple Ultra, which I've been testing out, which is 49 millimeters, and I'll put it on just for a frame of reference here. And I also publish Jake's Apple Watch World. And what's interesting is this is 49 millimeters, and compared to the Rolex, it's bigger, but it's not that much bigger. And So it's, if 50 millimeters is just 1 millimeter bigger than this, it's not that huge. And it's 3 millimeters bigger than a 47 millimeter Panerai, which Rolex made for Panerai for years, those 47 inchers. So it is potentially wearable. And from what I understand, Rolex has done their best to figure out a way to make it as wearable as possible, which is fantastic. So I very carefully read the Rolex presentation, and they did an incredible job. So I figure what we do is we would just take a quick walk through it, and then share our comments with it. Does that sound like a good idea, Karissa?
Sounds fun to me.
All right. The horizon of the deep. As profound as the depths of the ocean may be, they open up new horizons for humanity. But reaching these yet undiscovered locations requires withstanding extreme pressure. For almost 70 years, Rolex has accompanied explorers, developing ever more powerful tool watches. Now that's really profound just there, because I don't think I've ever heard Rolex refer to their professional watches as tool watches.
I was about to say that's very interesting. I feel like it's like the commoners who call them like tool watches, and I haven't normally heard that from them.
And now the landed gentry is referring to them as tool watches. That's interesting.
Exactly.
And Rolex has accompanied explorers. And as you may or may not have seen on the article I did about the Apple Ultra on Rolex, I pointed out that there were some remarkable similarities. And our Captain Danny put together a video of every time in the presentation they said explorers. And it was funny because I think it was like 7 or 8 times they're like explorer, exploration, explorers, explorers, explorers. So, but this is the real deal. I mean, this is, being able to go down 36,090 feet, which is 11,000 meters, is crazy. And of course, humans can't go that deep without exploding, obviously. And the funny thing is, I when I read the material, Rolex mentioned that they over-test it. So they have these special Comex machines where they test it 25% deeper, which they do with all the Rolex watches, just to make sure, you're not going to experience an unexpected failure. That's amazing. All right, so I'll continue on. Models that became both watchmaking icons and benchmarks in the diving world, namely the Submariner, launched in 1953, the Sea Dweller in 1967, and the Rolex DEEPSEA in 2008. As a result of this expertise, the Oyster Perpetual DEEPSEA Challenge represents a new milestone in the journey to the deep. Are you familiar with the movie The Deep?
No.
Oh, I think it took place off the coast of Florida near Bermuda, if I recall
What's
correctly.
the premise? Maybe I have. I don't know.
It was Nick Nolte and Jacqueline Bisset, and it's a scuba diving movie. It's from 1977. It was a huge hit. It was after Jaws, but it was called The Deep. So it just reminds me of the milestone to the deep. So the thing, one of the things, Karissa, that's so kind of fascinating about this watch is that Hans Wilsdorf was obsessed with making the best watches money could buy. And as we'll see later on, he mentioned in a letter, I think in 1914 or 15, to Egler, he said, we've got to figure out how to make a waterproof wristwatch. We got to do it. And this was new information for me. Now, I'm working on a set of books, and I'm up to 12 volumes on the complete history of Rolex. And this is new to me. I didn't have that in there. I wasn't aware of that letter that he wrote in 1914, but it doesn't surprise me. And as we know, in 1926, Rolex was the first company to successfully come to market with a waterproof watch that worked, that everybody could enjoy. And then in 1953, when they came out with the Submariner, as well as the original DEEPSEA Special, that was a game changer. And so Rolex, as they say in their own words, they've really pioneered waterproofness in wristwatches. And this is just the latest evolutionary step in that.
Really quick, I just want to highlight something that you keep saying, and like I wasn't aware of it until we started talking about this, but you keep saying 1953. I didn't know about, sea dwellers until 1960. Like, and you keep saying 1953, which I think is super interesting and awesome because I don't think a lot of people know about that 1953 date.
Yeah. So here's what's so fascinating about 1953, and nobody knows this. How do I know this? Because as I mentioned, I'm working on a series of books. I'm doing a dozen books on the history of Rolex. And there is a Rolex executive whose name was Rene Paul Jeanneret. And his story is stupefying. He's the guy, he invented the Rolex Submariner and developed it and brought it to market. And nobody knows who he is. I published pictures of him on Instagram and said, if anybody recognizes this dude, come forth, and nobody knew who he was. But he basically invented and pioneered the Submariner in 1953. And what's significant about that, though, is that Auguste Piccard and his son Jacques Piccard built a special submersible called the Bathyscaphe Trieste. And in 1953, also, and keep in mind, in 1953 is when the first explorers summited Everest, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. And their team was equipped with Rolex Oyster Perpetuals, kind of like the one you have. And so 1953 was a seminal year. And I'll show that Rolex ad that we looked at from 1953. Remember I showed it to you?
Yeah, that would be really interesting, I think, if you could.
Oh, yeah. We'll put that up in the video. And so 1953 was a seminal year, but in that ad, Rolex talks about how these two dudes, a father and son, took the Bathyscaphe Trieste off the coast of Italy and set an all-time depth record, and I think it was at 10,350 feet. And in that same year, they debuted the Submariner at Baselworld in Switzerland. And it's become arguably the most iconic watch made to date, or certainly one of them, and definitely at the tippy top of that list. And that's a game changer. Now, you mentioned the Sea Dweller. The Sea Dweller was developed, and the first prototypes came out in 1967. But ironically, Rolex didn't actually introduce the Sea Dweller to the public where people could actually buy it until 1971. As a matter of fact, the Sea Dweller in 1967 was part of a top secret program where Rolex was testing them with the U.S. Navy Sea Lab program, which I also cover quite a bit in my books. And I've covered many times on RolexMagazine.com. But yeah, 1953 and 1967 are two major years. Now, what they did come out with in 1967 is the single red Submariners. You remember those? You've seen those before?
Yeah.
And those are beautiful watches, and they're 40 millimeters. So you've probably, have you ever worn one before?
Yes, I went to a vintage shop here in Miami and got to try one on. Beautiful.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. And of course, today Rolex makes a 43 millimeter Sea Dweller that's a single red Sea Dweller. But once again, those 1967 Sea Dwellers were not ever made available to the public and weren't sold. They were given to real explorers who tested them, which is just amazing. So, when you look at this watch, what comes to mind? You just think this is just like a very manly.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, when I look at it, it does. It looks like a Sea Dweller. I don't know how to explain it, but like it looks awesome. I mean, definitely not something that catches my eye because I mean, knowing the size of it is what I'm like. Okay, well, it's great. It's an awesome watch. Just not. Don't think I can rock it as well as maybe like a big dude can.
So when you saw the photos of James Cameron wearing it, it looked pretty good on him.
So it
It
looked
did
really
look.
good on him. And I mean, you could still tell it's a monster watch, you know. Like my dad is a huge dude and has thick wrists, and I could definitely see him wearing that and it looking just perfect on him.
All right, so next we see that on the back of it, this watch has some special engravings where it says Mariana Trench, and it has the date of January 23rd, 1960, which is when the U.S. Navy, with the Bathyscaphe Trieste with Donald Walsh and Jacques Picard, set the all-time depth record where they took it down 7 miles. And then we also see 2603 2012, which is when James Cameron descended down in the Challenger Deep to the exact same place.
Right.
And what a lot of people don't know, I'll share a fascinating anecdote with you about this, is when Picard took it down in 1953, it was his submarine and his father's. So he didn't have to ask anybody's permission. They sold that Bathyscaphe Trieste submersible to the U.S. Navy, and Jacques Picard was on it in 1960. And he didn't ask their permission when he took it down. He just snuck it on board and took it down 7 miles. And then he sent a telegram when it came back up, kind of like the Timex thing that said, you know, it took a licking and kept on ticking.
Yeah.
And you know, just kind of surprised everybody. But the U.S. Navy had no idea that he had it on there. And what I discovered, because it was part of a top secret Rolex program at the time, and but what I later discovered is that the U.S. Navy never would have allowed him to put that watch on there because under pressure, if it exploded, it could have sunk the Bathyscaphe Trieste
Yeah. Everybody.
and killed them.
Yeah.
So the question is, how did he know that it would be okay?
He trusted Rolex?
A great, well, yeah, but I think he did the math himself because you know these guys were the top. He was Swiss, and he and his father did the math and said she should be fine. So they had full faith. Like he basically put his life and Don Walsh's life in Rolex's hands because he was so confident. So yeah, which is really amazing if you think about it. But this watch is an homage to these men and their spirit of exploration, which is just amazing. Did you? Well, let's see. In 2012, you were
I'm 25 now, so
15 years old.
How? How?
You in 2012, you were 15.
I think so. The math's right.
So you probably didn't watch this.
No. So I would hear my dad and brother chattering about all this stuff, but I don't think I even really cared too much at that point. But now I really wish I did because now I'm reading this and I'm like even the other day you were like, yeah, because I saw it on the news, and I'm like, what? Like shocked. Like of course you saw it on the news. So like I'm here like, man, that would be so cool if I could like turn on the TV and watch some like Rolex news or some historical thing happening. I mean, well, it's pretty cool because we're part of something historical because of this one. But anyway.
Well, so tell us a little bit about that because you mentioned when we were chatting about how when you were a young girl, your father and your brother were watch nuts and would just keep talking about Rolex and watches.
They still do. So I mean, even before I got COVID, just like everybody else apparently, and started a watch Instagram because I was bored and I saw some people posting watch pics and I was like, oh my god, finally other people out there with this hobby, addiction, whatever it is. Because even before Instagram or whatever, we would go on family vacation and take wrist shots of us three, or my mom too sometimes. She doesn't care too much about the watches, and it would go nowhere. And that's, it would just be to us. And like my dad, I'll be at school or something like that, and he would send me like a picture of a beer with like his watch on it at the beach while he's hanging out with my mom on a day off or something. So it's always been something that we kind of just always like. And also my family has, instead of like being like huggy and like kisses, we tug on each other's Rolex or watch just to be like, hey, love you.
Really?
And yeah, like I'll be like, let's say we're eating dinner on a table or something. My dad says something cute, but he's still talking, and I don't want to interrupt him. I'll just pull on his little thing. We look at each other. Even my brother's 7 years older than me, and we have this like, we're always fighting, bickering, but we love each other. So we're not super affectionate, but when we do, he'll come behind me and just like do that, and my heart will melt, and I'll be like, oh. So we always just, talk about watches in the sense that we'll go out and we'll be like, oh my God, what's that person wearing? Plus, we live in Miami where, the watch spotting is insane. And watching TV, we'll stop a movie to see, oh, what watch are they wearing? So it's just really has always been a part of my life, like at least in the background. And now that I'm at the age that I can explore the hobby that I love and, connect with people like you, oh, please, this is just becoming such a bigger problem.
It's so fascinating because your passion is intoxicating. And you're on Instagram. It's just amazing, your posts and stuff, and you have a great sense of style, and I'm a big fan of yours, obviously, but how did you get so into it, just out of curiosity?
Well, okay, so I love taking pictures of my pretty things, but I also don't like to rub it in, or I love material things, but I'm not materialistic. And I know that people could take it the wrong way if I'm here like, look at this watch I own, look at this. So I never really shared my passion with any of my friends or anything that like that. They knew I liked watches and I had cool Rolexes, but nothing ever more than that. And when I started this Instagram, I was like, finally a place that I can post my watch and not feel like, I'm the worst person ever and trying to make someone feel bad. I'm just sharing something that I like. And then I didn't show my face at first. And then it became, okay, I'll show my face. And then I became really close with a lot of my followers. And they were like, we want to see more of your style. How do you style the watch? And my watches are a huge part of my identity. If anybody knows me, they know that I love to get dressed up and go out. But I don't feel complete if my watch doesn't match my outfit or my jewelry or my purse hardware, like anything. So for me, my watch is a huge part of my life, getting ready and where I'm going. So when I get to post that and then I have people connect with me in a positive way, it's like the best feeling ever. So now I had a personal page and I never post there anymore. Now I'm just like, okay, well, my friends that I know in real life, I'll meet them in real life. And then I have all my friends on Instagram that, we get to talk watches all day. And I bet a lot of people think, oh, you're some 25-year-old girl. I'm sure in your DMs, it's just guys being like, trying to date you. And I must say that, yeah, sure, I get some of that, but not really. I also just talk to a lot of people about, their life and then the watches. So, I really enjoy that fact of the watches bringing people together. And then, like, there's so many people that, like, I have grown men that I connect to, that we relate to with our stories, our passion for watches and stuff like that. So, I don't know, there's so much more to, watch collecting than just posting pictures, like pretty pictures, or, just having a cool watch.
Well, speaking of which, you know that photo of you? It's on your watch at Watch and Woman. You're at Watch and Woman on Instagram. It was one of the first images you did where you're wearing the hat, where you can just see part of your face, but you see the watch. You know that? I'll put it up with the video. That's a magnificent photo. I mean, you're so talented when it.
Thank you.
Like I'm a huge fan of yours.
Oh gosh, well, I'm blushing. Thanks.
So we were talking about when you were 15 years old, this event occurred.
Yeah.
And I had been doing Jake's Rolex World at that time for 4 years. And what was so strange about it, so we're going back 10 years ago. at the time on Twitter, you couldn't post pics on Twitter, which sounds really strange to even say today. But what happened was literally like days before James Cameron, I knew James Cameron was a Rolex guy. And I heard it was announced he was going to make this dive. And I thought, well, I'll cover this because he's a super cool Rolex guy. So I was looking at photographs as he was preparing to descend. And I'm like, what is that? Is that, he's got a Rolex on the outside of his submersible? But I've never seen a Rolex that big before. Like, what the, yeah. It must be like some prototype, or I wasn't too sure what it was. And sure enough, so I ran a story on that. And then when he descended, what's crazy is, do you know who Paul Allen was? The co-founder of Microsoft with Bill Gates. He had a yacht. I think it was called the Octopus or something like that.
Like the James Bond Octopussy?
Octopussy or something like that. He had this huge ship. I mean, we're talking mega yacht.
Like a Disco Valenti type, like...
Yeah, yacht. Exactly.
Yeah.
James Bond. James Bond.
Yeah, so he brings his mega yacht out off the coast of Guam into the at the Marianas Trench where the Challenger Deep is, and he live blogs this whole thing, and he's taking photographs and uploading them to a service called TwitPic. What I'm doing is I'm following this, and I'm like, oh wow, he's got pictures, because none of this was live. So I download his images and started live blogging this event in real time as it occurred, which was just amazing. And this is the first time in my life I've ever seen somebody do something with a Rolex that was like super, super badass cool. Which is just, it just completely blew my mind. And I mean, this is a guy who wasn't resting on his laurels, because with James Cameron, you know, he could just make movies all day. And what's he doing? It's like Jacques Cousteau came back to life or something.
Right.
It was just amazing. So that was crazy. All right, so getting back to the watch, let's take a look at some of the details. Rolex created its own proprietary titanium called Titan RLX, which is interesting. So they always do that. They make their own proprietary version.
Because it's in-house, right? So they control everything.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I've been to the Rolex factory where they do all their smelting, where they melt down gold and stainless and all that stuff, obviously where they made this. And it's stupefying. I think I showed you in the press materials. Look at this.
Yeah.
That's because they superheat up the titanium so that when they stamp it, it's more malleable. So I think what they do is they get the metal where it's closer to a molten state by putting it under very intense heat. So as far as R&D is concerned, this is like really heavy duty. Here's another photograph of it going through the process, and you know, Rolex has never made a titanium watch before.
I was about to say it's so different. You know, the backing before, the case back was titanium, but that's it.
Now, speaking of which, there's James Cameron rocking it, and he's a fairly trim guy. You know, he's not like a big, huge guy, but there he is, and it looks to me, it has like that 47 millimeter Panerai vibe. And then here's another picture of him with his submersible, and in front of him, of course, he has an original. That's probably an original DEEPSEA in front of him. I don't know if that's the original or a facsimile of it. And then what he also has on that table is the one that was on the outside of his submersible. And then I believe in the middle, he has his Sea Dweller that he wears, his standard Sea Dweller, just for a frame of reference. But is that a cool photo or what? So we see that it's guaranteed waterproofness to a depth of 11,000 meters, which is 36,090 feet. Damn.
If I drop my watch that far down the ocean, like that's it. Like, like
Long gone. Um, it has the ring lock system, which is patented. And what the ring lock is they literally take like a ring, if I understand it correctly, and they put it in the middle case so that under tremendous pressure it can't collapse. It's like an inner support system, if I understand it correctly. It has a helium escape valve, unidirectional bezel, chromolite display. It comes with the Rolex Superlative Chronometer certification specific to Rolex. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not. Could you elaborate?
Yeah. So Rolex have the professional tool watches have always been COSC certified, but years ago, I want to say like 5 years ago, something like that, Rolex came out with their own standard that's higher than COSC, and they certify their watches now as being guaranteed plus or minus 2 seconds in precision. So it's keeping time like a quartz watch, basically, and they guarantee it. And that's what the Rolex Superlative Chronometer certification is.
Very cool. Very cool.
It comes with an international 5-year guarantee. It also has the COSC certification. It has the paramagnetic blue parachrome hairspring. And when I was at the Rolex factory in Switzerland, I saw them make these things. And it was one of the freakiest things I've ever seen. Yeah, it's just like super high tech. Oh, just incredible. And it also has the Oyster Lock safety clasp with the extension, which is pretty cool. And it's got a fat crystal, as we see here in the picture. Now, with the titanium, notice it's highly brushed.
I was going to say, I really like that. I actually really love that. I don't know if anyone else does, but...
Yeah, it gives it a distinctive trademark look to it, which is different. And then what we also see is running along the edge here, one of the things they did to differentiate it is on the crown guards, they polished it, but with the chamfered edge that runs along, they also polish that. So it makes it really pop, and it gives it like a very trademark kind of look. Oh, and here we are with the RLX Titanium Ultralight Resistance. RLX Titanium is a grade 5 titanium alloy selected by Rolex for its lightness and resistance to deformation and corrosion. Although intensive to abysmal pressure, the experimental watch that accompanied James Cameron in the Mariana Trench still posed a wearability problem due to its weight, as it was made from 904L steel. To address this issue, RLX Titanium was used to create the case and bracelet of the DEEPSEA Challenge, considerably reducing its weight. The watch is 30% lighter than the experimental watch that inspired it. So look at this. This machine, see how it says Comex on here?
Yeah.
This is a new testing machine to test this, I believe. And Rolex it says in here, Rolex worked with Comex to build this special machine just to test these watches, which is incredible. There's the movement. So this new watch features the new reference 3230 caliber movement in it, which is just like a work of art in and of itself.
All right, so Jake, you already know how I feel about wearing this watch. How do you feel?
About the watch?
Yeah, like would you wear it? Would you want one? What's the deal?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm definitely not going down 36,000 feet anytime soon, so I don't need it. But I think it's just absolutely fascinating. It's a fascinating work of engineering art. That's a really, really good question. Yeah, I would definitely try rocking it. I have no idea what to expect because I'm a bigger dude. I'm 6 feet tall. I weigh 200 pounds. And I'm totally comfortable with the 47 millimeter Panerai. So, yeah, I can't wait to try it out. And hopefully we'll get that opportunity, which would be fascinating, to see it in person. And I think we're going to be, we have some surprise content coming up that has to do with this watch, which is going to be really incredible, which will include a lot more insight on it. Yeah, I think it's just super cool and super interesting, and it's really neat to see how Rolex is maintaining its lead with this technology. I think the other big question I have is this the beginning of Rolex working with titanium?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. They're
So I,
it's going to be lighter. So I feel like well, it depends on what I guess the person wants because I really love when that those watches kind of are heavy and they feel luxurious. But I know that there's a lot of women out there who the reason why they don't opt for bigger watches is because they don't like the weight. So maybe titanium watches is the way to go.
Yeah, like that Yacht Master, for instance, that prototype. If they bring that to life, that'll be a huge seller. Now,
Yeah.
my understanding of this watch is it's going to retail for 25,000 US dollars, and I believe that price point is based upon the fact that it takes a lot more time to make this watch because it's made out of titanium. Is my takeaway from it. I'm not certain of that, but they will be available for purchase, which is the first time in history that Rolex has had a deep sea challenge watch available. So I think it's going to be very, very highly collectible. And knowing Rolex, I would assume they're not going to make that many of them. I might be wrong, but it'll be interesting to see if there's I'm sure there'll be a waiting list day one.
Yeah, there's always the waiting list. But yeah, it would be interesting. It would be interesting to see how much they actually make available. Maybe it's like a test run type thing and seeing, okay, how many people are actually interested, and if they are, maybe they'll introduce another model or something. I don't know because they might want to keep this like a collector's piece, but I think they should because I think this is super cool and it's like history, but yet all the cool functions put into one. Like I love the fact that this is like you just keep trying and trying and keep going. Like I'm ready for the next one already.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of which, and this will be my last question, just out of curiosity, what do you want to see from Rolex in the future?
Ooh. No one's ever asked me that question. What do I want?
La 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 la.
Oh, I really want to think of a better answer for this one, but I will tell you something about Rolex. I was a big watch girl in literally where I liked just big watches, and I really wouldn't go below a 36. And even then, I would wear a 36, and I'd be like, oh, that's my smaller watch. They came out with those 31 millimeter OPs, so girly, so different than anything I had in my collection. And I really love that I got that, the Rolex look with the really cute dial that wasn't totally pearly or, too girly. Because I'm girly, just
So
I
you
don't know, not
so
not
you
nonsense.
so you have a 31 OP.
I have
is
two.
that right?
I have two. I have the pink one and the Tiffany blue one.
In 31.
Yes. And I wouldn't want it in any other size bigger.
That's the smaller one.
Yes, it's the smallest one,
Small.
and I don't think that. I mean, they look great in the bigger sizes, but personally, for me, when I have color like that in my collection, I don't like to put too much color, so I like to keep them small. And then, my other watches are a lot of the, gold, stainless steel, two tones. So those are like my fun watches, and Rolex just really surprised me with that because I never thought I'd be saying, I want a 31 millimeter. Like I never thought I would be saying that, and it just kind of opened my eyes to now wanting a little bit more girly stuff. So it's really interesting. Maybe I want like a mix from Rolex of like fun and girly, but still tool watchy, if that makes sense.
So my takeaway is you're running the gamut from 40 millimeter, which you're wearing right now, down to 31. So you're covering both ends, the hyper feminine and hyper masculine.
Oh, well, my collection, I have a little bit of everything because I identify my personality with what watch I'm wearing for the day. So I definitely have, in the middle, 36. I have big 40s. And then I even have smaller than 31s. I really don't wear them too often. But now I definitely reach for smaller sizes. Like one of the watches I want next is a 31 millimeter green OP. I used to want a green sub. I would take a Kermit, a Starbucks, a Hulk, whatever, that had green on it. And now I'm like, no. I don't want a big green watch. Now I want a 31 millimeter green OP. I still want a sub, but, black dial, regular.
So those...
It's more masculine.
Yeah, so those color OPs were similar in retro styling to the Stella dials.
Yes, which I love.
So you want, like, if you were the designer of Rolex, you'd want more colors, probably?
Okay, well, they did that, and it did well. So,
like the coral red one, right?
I know that there's a lot of people who love vintage Rolex. So if they would take just a look out of, like, the 70s watches and see kind of, like, their trends there, I think that would be really cool. Like, you see it now, people with the wood dials and the colorful dials, that's going back, and I think that they should do something like that, because a lot of the people who are getting into Rolex now, I feel, like, really into the uniqueness of, like, oh, I have this color, or I have this style, or like this, where it has a lot of Rolex history. It's just done in a modern way. At least that's what would make me excited, because I love all of that Rolex history, and I think they did a lot of cool things back in the day. So, yeah.
I agree with you. They should bring back the walnut wood dials, and I think they were gilt dials, if I recall correctly, on the day date, and they had them on the yellow gold date chest as well. Those were magnificent. It's like a modern version of that would be amazing. Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing this exploration with me. And hopefully at some point I want to see you rock one of these. I want to see what it looks like.
I want to get one on my wrist. Let's see. Maybe I will be proved wrong. Maybe I'll fall in love and just want to keep it.
Yeah, that'd be fascinating. All right, well, thank you so much, Karissa.
No, thank you, Jake.
Tell people where they can find you.
You can follow me on Instagram at Watchin' Woman, or on YouTube at Karissa.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.